Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Thursday Night Live. Good to have you with us. If you are watching this live, you've just experienced one of the best days of the year. Was it ever awesome here on the West Coast? For those of you who aren't here, you should be. Anyhow, it's exciting for me to welcome a friend of mine, Brad Sumner. Welcome, Brad.
Hey, Lindsay. Good to be here.
Yeah, Brad lives in Langley, and we met, I think, for the first time when Carla and I went over to plant a church there.
Now, that seems right.
Does that seem right? Now, you see, The reason I say it like that is my dad texted me a photo of your wedding.
Yeah, they were there.
They were there. I didn't know that. So you knew my parents. I didn't even know that. Look at that. So you've been married for how long, Brad?
21 years. Yeah. 21. We've got two kids who are teenagers and working on heading off to college in the fall in the middle of a pandemic, our oldest, and a rescue dog that keeps us active, and a neighborhood that's lively, and lots of fun. So.
A rescue dog. Okay, I've seen your dog. You like to post some photos of your dog on social media.
Yeah, it's true. You got to keep it light, keep it fun.
I was joking with you earlier. I basically, since we've moved over to Victoria, I just stalk you on social media and just sort of follow you around on your life, and I quite enjoy it. So you love the outdoors. What kinds of things do you enjoy about the outdoors?
For me, I find it to be rejuvenating. I'm a high energy, high activity person, and so I like things like running marathons. I like doing more. I know it sounds sadistic to some, but I find when I'm running, it's incredibly therapeutic. I usually don't listen to music. It's just quiet. That's when the thoughts race in my head. I can get sorted on some stuff. I love being by the ocean. I love kayaking. I like snowshoeing. I like hiking mountains and stuff like that. So I'm not extreme on any of those, but I know my limits and I stay within them.
That's good. That's probably a good thing in a lot of different ways. I think, Brad, I had met your dad before I actually met you. Your dad was pastoring up in Duncan, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
I went up to learn some things from the Sumner world, and lo and behold, meeting you a few years later, it's been really great. So as I joked about earlier, I've been stalking you on social media. You are definitely live and active in that world. And what I thought we'd do tonight is something a little different than I've done in the past on our Thursday Night Live, is I've taken a whole bunch of your quotes because I'm presuming that when you quote them, that you're not just trying to get followers, that you probably there's something about what was said there that has caught your attention. Hey?
Yeah, totally.
So this it's not a podcast. You and I were talking about that. Is it a blog? I don't know exactly what it is. It's a conversation on social media feeds.
Totally.
We've been trying to just talk through life and recognizing that life can be hard. It can be frustrating, but it also can be incredible. And all of that was true prior to COVID.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that maybe COVID has just intensified kind of all of that. And so you had a quote here that pandemic life can be exhausting. But what if we could recapture an ancient rhythm of work and rest that could help us break free of some of the lies we tell ourselves that lead us towards burnout?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Ancient rhythms, rest, lies. Talk to us about that a bit.
Yeah, well, I think one of the lies I tell myself, and it may not be true for other people, but I have a narrative that can run in my head to the effect of, I'm only worthwhile if I'm productive, if there's high output coming from me in some category of my life. And so if I'm productive, I'm valuable. And if I can continue to be productive all the time, every day, all day, then I'm valuable to people around me, because you're getting usually pretty solid feedback on that. So I think one of the challenges for me is just naming that as a lie, and just saying that I'm valuable beyond what I contribute or produce to people around me, to my culture, society, social media, whatever, and just saying, am I still valuable, loved, and worthwhile, even if I don't produce something? And so for me, the way to try and unwind myself from that lie is actually to take a day out of the week and set it aside from the producing of stuff, and try and guard that, and try and recapture that sense of like, okay, so if I did nothing productive today related to my employment, and I have two different jobs that I work at. So if I did nothing related to either of those two today, was today still a good day? Was today a day that I experienced my belovedness of people around me? And so that's it. I find that is one of the things for me that's a challenge. I find it very hard, so I'm not always successful at it, but I find that it does help to sort of break, or at least interrupt, that voice that says, if you're not producing something, you're not valuable.
So it leads me to want to ask then, Brad, where are you getting your value?
Yeah, as a person of faith, and particularly as a Christian, for me, I believe that my sense of value comes from my createdness and from the Creator. And so my right relationship with God, with creation, with humanity, with others around me, ought to give me enough of a sense of that worth and value. And I think that's a harder thing in our culture than in some other places and times in history, but it's certainly something that gets a lot of other things layered over it, even titles, jobs, positions. For me, I'm in a ministry position, and so that there's a challenge factor with that, is just the sense of who do I have a relationship with God outside of just the stuff that I happen to produce for God because I'm employed by an organization like a church.
Right. Yeah. Are you a professional Christian, Christ follower, or are you a Christ follower who happens to have an opportunity to lead within a church? That's significant, because if we don't get that right, and I say we because I'm in a similar role to you, we could end up becoming religious, and probably half the New Testament we should really take to heart, because Jesus kind of went after religiosity.
Yeah. I mean, it is beyond just a pastor problem. I think we got to acknowledge that. Like, we're right now, one of the conversations I'm having with people around me is we're in a profound season of non-doing. And so some of the places that we have received accolades and value as human beings have been taken away from us. So some of us are really good softball coaches, and that's not happening in the same way. Or some of us are really good at rushing into help, in volunteer settings, and that's off the table right now. And so some people that I'm in conversation with are really struggling with that sense of, but that used to define me. Like, I'm the helper. I'm the one who rushes in. And when they can't do that in the way that the tools that we've been accustomed to doing that for, the questions start to really come up, like, am I valuable? Am I worthwhile? And so this is a challenging season to sit with that sense of worth. And I think there's two sort of tracks in that. There's some personalities that have sort of just rolled over and given up and gone, I don't know, I'm gonna numb out. Whether it's Netflix or whatever it is. And then there's other personalities that have thought, okay, well, I'm just going to dial up the activity, and figure out ways to make that voice go away by just increasing output. And so these are people that, are just like voraciously posting on social media and or doing things and or, almost like an addictive to personality to something that's new or something that will fill that sense of void for them. And that's another, I would say, trap for me personality wise. I'm someone that likes new. I like novelty. And so I can become obsessed with sort of filling that and just like trying to satiate that with just new stuff all the time. How many of this can I try? How many of that can I do? How many of, and some of that can be all right, but some of it can actually be because I don't actually want to hear that voice that says, but who are you when you're not doing all that stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. So God loves us first and foremost before we produce a thing, before we do anything right. He just flat out loves us. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we see that, in Matthew chapter 3, for example, when Jesus is baptized, it's at the very start. Like he's not done anything. He's not preached a single sermon. He's not healed that we know of a single individual that was sick. Nothing's happening. And in that moment, God says, "This is my son whom I love, in whom I am well pleased." And his belovedness is spoken over his life in that moment of non-doing. It's just a simple act of obedience, to follow and indicate towardness of the heart and the life toward God. And Jesus says, "Yeah, I want to do that so that all righteousness will be fulfilled." But now I'm preaching, so that's for Sunday, not for Thursday Night Live. So,
hey, no, that's good. So you mentioned rest, and then another tweet that I grabbed off your feed was Sabbath keeping is not about getting the exact regulations right. It's about getting relationships with God, others, and creation right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I'm recovering from many things in my life. One is I'm a recovering know-it-all. So I need to try and learn to say more often, I'm not sure. I don't know. And another thing I think I'm recovering from was in my growing up experiences, the sense of legalism around particular things like Sabbath was quite strong. And out of a very good place and a good heart, and maybe other people that are watching or listening can identify with that. But somewhere I interpreted that as if I got all of the check boxes right on that one, I was succeeding at that particular religious activity. And it had nothing to do with the heart. It had everything to do with, was I outwardly evidencing a set of activities that could demonstrate. So mostly it was a list of nots, don't get out of the clothes on Sunday morning till Sunday night church, don't shop on Sundays, don't do. And so if you successfully went from morning till night with not sort of violating any of those things, you were a good Sabbath keeper. But that actually doesn't touch anything of the heart. It simply touches the mind and the calendar in a way that actually doesn't mean you're rightly relating to God. It just means you're pretty good at keeping sets of lists and rules. Yeah. So I think there's a danger there in almost any spiritual activity, not just Sabbath keeping. You can wake up in the morning, open the scriptures if you're a person of faith, read it, and then 5 minutes later, you've read it. You might have even journaled and done some other spiritual practices related to that. But if I came to you 25 minutes later and said, so how is what you did 25 minutes ago going to shape and influence the rest of your day? Be like, well, what are you talking about? I got the checkbox done. I read my Bible. I prayed every day, And so there can be a hollowness to that. I'm not negating the practices themselves, but there's sort of a vain and empty repetition that can go on in our lives that we can feel like we're being successful by external mechanisms. And a lot of church and religion actually gives us that feedback loop. And yet we can actually be missing the point in its entirety.
Okay. Yeah. So a Sabbath rest, what does that look like for Brad Sumner? What does that look like maybe for the Sumner family, or is anything we can glean there?
Yeah, it's every one of our family, intriguingly, now operates on a completely different schedule because we have 2 kids with jobs, right? So people with young adults in their house or others will know, or with really young kids will know the complexity of sort of schedule alignment in the sense of, and then, you know, in my world, Sundays are a work day. And so we've had to sort of choose that some of us will Sabbath on certain days and others will Sabbath on other days or practice that in a different way. So for me, what it looks like is that's a Saturday. And so Saturday, you know, I am not setting an alarm. I'm just letting the rhythm of my body tell me how much sleep I need, or maybe how much I've deprived sleep of myself for the week. I'm getting up, I'm having a leisurely cup of coffee. I'm probably going for a run, you know, and paying attention to sort of my physical health. I've intriguingly, we started doing a Saturday newspaper subscription, national newspaper. So we read through that, sitting across from each other, my wife and I. I am doing something that I thought only old people do, like really old people. And that is, I have become a crossword enthusiast during COVID, which I would have mocked my pre-COVID self for adopting that practice.
Brad, just there's some people mocking you right now. Okay,
I know.
Mock yourself. Don't worry, they're doing it for you. But carry on.
I was told this was a safe place, Lindsay. Come on.
Well, it is with you and me, but out there on the Ethernet, I don't know what's going on.
There you go. But what I find by that is actually I'm working a part of my brain that is a part that I don't work in other spheres of my life. And the other part of it is that I work in a profession where it's hard to measure, yeah. and finish lines are a really challenging thing. And so for me, what I've realized, one thing I actually like about crosswording is that there's a finish line at the end of the day or the couple of days. I'm done the puzzle, and I have a little ritual. I take it, I celebrate. Everybody knows that I'm done, and then I take the newspaper page over and I throw it in the recycling bin with great joy, because I'm like, that's done. You know, I accomplished that this week. And so it's a funny little sort of thing that I've come to really enjoy. In fact, one day the paper came late, like a couple hours late, and I was all grouchy and emailing and texting the people and be like, where's my paper coming? I thought, I am behaving like an 85-year-old, and I'm in my mid-40s. You know, this is what COVID has done to us all.
and go back to your comment earlier about the impact of your time with God. Is it still there 25 minutes? You're on your Sabbath and going, where's my paper?
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. So, and then, totally. Yeah, Saturday just becomes a leisurely sort of day. Like it's not a day to sort of jam as many things into, you know, as other days, where your sort of calendar, most of us have a rhythm. Most of us, our rhythm runs the majority of our lives. We get up at certain times, you know, we clock in at certain times, that kind of stuff. But on a Saturday, what I'm trying to do is step out of that and just let the rhythm emerge on its own. If it's a nice day and we want to go for a walk, great. If we want to, you know, just it's a different way of trying to think about that day and just be restored and figure out what are things that are fun and life-giving to do. So I might be reading a book that's not a book related to something that I'm working on or teaching through or anything like that. I might be exploring just something that I find curious. Like if there's something that's sort of a little tweak in my brain, or we've done some, you know, work around the house, some gardening, stuff like that. Just sort of very open-handed stuff that gets done. If the house needs to be cleaned a little bit, we do it, that kind of stuff. But it's not this sense of like, okay, this is the list of stuff to get through today. We just try and keep it as generally as list-free as possible.
Yeah.
And that's been life-giving for me, because it just feels, like there's a little more breathing room in the week than when I'm just churning through stuff and figuring like, oh, I got to use this time to get some extra stuff done, or if I didn't get this done. So I'm trying to also just take like in the hamster wheel and just step off of it. And just, if the wheel still runs over here, like just acknowledge, yes, there's a lot of things that still need doing. Yes, my brain is still feeding me information about like, yeah, but what about this? Or you didn't call that person back before the end of the week. Yep. I'll pay attention to that, but not today. Today's not the day for that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a different rhythm, and I'm enjoying it.
One of the things I have found with what you just said, when something sort of starts trying to almost combat that sense of rest and relaxation, and all these ideas start coming, I gotta write a list of those things, and once I've kind of written it down, I can just forget about it.
Yeah.
And it seems to really help. It just seems to release it from having to be on the front of my brain. So
yeah, totally. Yeah.
So Brad, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, when I did our little promo video, I took this one quote, and it was from a desert mother, you said, Anna, and I could not pronounce her last name, so we're just going to call her Anna. And the quote was this: like a ship, our soul is sometimes engulfed by the waves without, and is sometimes swamped by the bilge water within. I don't know why, but that just kind of cracks me up. And I thought, man, that is life. Life happens to me, and I happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes, we can be our own worst enemies in some situations, and in other situations, our things that are happening around us, we get to actually choose how we're going to respond to those things. So I think about somebody here like my paternal grandfather, who lived on Salt Spring Island, and he was a guy who, in his teenage years, lost the use of one eye, and then in his middle life lost one of his legs to cancer, and so lived with a amputated leg. And so he was a part of the disability community for a long time, and he there's sort of a split in the disability community between those who can respond to those things with a sense of bitterness, which weds itself to activism, which weds itself to sort of this real, can be anger that expresses itself out into the world, longing for justice in other ways. There can be positive aspects of it, but there's also a shadow side to that, or an underbelly. And then for him, what he decided was, you know what, this stuff has happened to me, so it could swamp me. Like I could go into a place of just saying I'm bitter, and live there the rest of my life, and sort of make everybody feel sorry for me and all this. But he chose to kind of step through that and say, you know what, this is my new life. I need to choose how I'm going to live it. And so he just chose to become a person who wanted to serve others and help them in whatever practical ways that he could. And so, he noticed that kids were getting into trouble on Salt Spring, and so he started up a restorative justice program out of that place of just saying, like, we can get angry about this kind of stuff, or we can just be on the solution side with it. And so I think he's always been a model of somebody for me that really chose a different path, even though he could have chosen that path of like, there's so much bilge water in my life, I'm just going to wallow in it and drown. And he was like, nope, just man the pumps. There's still going to be a bunch of bilge water here, but like, let's make this ship sailable and actually move in a certain direction. And I think that took an incredible amount of courage and a fortitude. And for him, he also got that from his sense of relatedness with God and with other people around him that were supporting him in that journey. And so that's sort of been an anchor for me, not to overwork your nautical metaphor, but
Anna's nautical.
Oh, yeah.
Now, so he had every reason, and had a right to get angry.
Mhm.
And I guess one of the things that I would say to folks out there who have maybe are feeling swamped or engulfed by life, that you actually need to enter into your anger and work through the stages, honestly, of grief.
Yeah.
Because if you just try to just push it aside and not deal with it, it's going to deal with you.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so to kind of work through that, the stages of grief, the acknowledgement, like just working through that, you can get to the other side. And as you mentioned, God can help us through all of that. But it's not just, I am going to just defiantly say that's not a part of my life. It's there's, yeah. Well,
yeah. And I think, the other thing to bring to the table is that most of the neuroscience and psychological literature these days is telling us that anger is really a secondary emotion. There's something underneath that, and so not doing the work to actually dig underneath that and figure out, so why am I angry? Why is this stirring something up in me? Is it fear? Is it loss, like you were talking about grief, a loss of an envisioned future for my life? All of those things can be, but you have to actually go underneath that and figure out, okay, what's there? There's something down in the belly of this ship that's actually obscured by the bilge water. And I need to do some work down there to figure out, because there's a hole in this boat that is going to sink me without some proper attention. And that's not, whether that's counseling or what other work needs to, certainly, I would also echo your response to say that people casting their lot in with Jesus and saying, you know what, this is a person who had every right to be angry because of all kinds of circumstances in his life, who was maligned and rejected, and yet chose a different pathway. And so it models something for me and for people of faith, I think.
So I've said to you, I've said to other people, you are one of the most positive individuals that I know. You are more than a glass half full guy. And I was just thinking about the words that Jesus was having. He's having a conversation with his disciples, and it was kind of a purpose, big picture, worldview conversation. And he made this comment that we find life when we give it away. And Brad, when I think of you, that seems to be the kind of life you live. You don't live life for Brad Sumner. You live life, and ultimately, I know, for your God, for Jesus, for his glory and his honor. But you live it in order to help others. You give your life away that others might live. Sounds like you had a great example in your, was it your grandfather?
Yeah.
How have you developed that in your life? Our world is not wired this way. We as humans are not, we have very much a propensity to want me first, but that's not where you are. And I know it might be a little bit of wiring, but there's also some work involved.
Yeah, I think, the other thing that I will say about that is that it was something that I saw modeled by people around me in both my family of origin and then, in some of the communities that I grew up in as well, more small rural farming communities where there's this sense of togetherness. There's a sense of like we look out for each other, and so I think that's a part of it. Certainly faith plays a part in that for me. And then the other piece for me is that, I want, I'm a pretty linear thinker. And so I like things like lists. I like to and I'm a very future oriented thinker. And so I'm always living in the future. And one of the gifts of always living in the future and being a linear thinker is you're always working from the future back into the present. And so I'm always asking myself, like, at the end of today, when I lay my head on the pillow, what are the things that I want to have accomplished today? Are there people that I want to have touched? Are there conversations that I want to have had? And then beyond that, looking further down the road, okay, so at the end of this year, what do I want this year to have characterized me? And then further down the road, like when I come to the end of my life, whenever that is, what do I want said about me? What do I want people to remember about me? And so part of that is just being driven by that sense of I want to, and I have a deep desire to see this world to be less a better place as a result of my presence in it. And for me, that comes from a sense of my faith and a sense of my convictions about that. But I think there's many friends that I have that don't share my faith, that share that same sense of like desire for a common good in the world. And so for me, that sort of serves as a driver. It drives, how I want to communicate on social media. It drives how I want to engage with my kids and my neighbors and people that I have challenges with, or that get angry about me at different things. So, I'm the wiring piece is probably like a bridge part of it. Like I want to walk towards other people and things and figure things out and say, what can we do about this together? And then the other part of it is more like an impact thing of just saying, I genuinely want to work together with others for the common good and see this world left a more beautiful, hope-filled, joyous place, or even an interaction with somebody, if I'm at the grocery store or something, I'm trying to think, okay, how can I operate and carry myself in such a way that when I leave this, or can I say, a kind word to somebody that maybe looks like they're having a rough day or something? So I'm just trying to think of that as I go through my day. And especially for me in this season of COVID, the other part of my life that I have is on Mondays, I work just a normal job. I work a retail job. And so I experience people coming into our store. And so I can, within a couple of seconds, what kind of an interaction you're going to have with that person. And so, I want to be that kind of a person that when I have an interaction with others, that they are actually seeing the goodness of God radiating through me. And that doesn't mean I'm going around saying, have you known about Jesus? Do you know about Jesus? Just means sometimes I'm like looking at somebody going, looks like you're having a rough day. Is there anything that I can do to help? Or is there anything just thinking about others and give you a chapter and verse for that if you want, kind of because preachers are good at that. But yeah, just thinking about others instead of yourself.
So what you've just said there seems to be something that influences how you engage in social media. This past week, I was going through YouTube or whatever, and I came across a Simon Sinek little talk on YouTube. And many of you have probably heard of Simon Sinek, really, really good communicator, not as a Christ follower as far as I know, but speaks some really amazing truth. And he was just talking about the positive and also the dangerous aspect of social media, and stating that it doesn't have to be negative, but it sure can be. And I know you sort of obviously have some thoughts around social media that helps you monitor what you do or don't do, maybe in that whole world.
Yeah, I think one of the intriguing pieces about social media to me is that you can choose to have a different personality on social media than you do in real life. But for me, I feel one of my values is congruent. I want to always be a person of congruence. And so I want somebody that would interact with me in real life to get the same type of interaction with me on social media. And so that's sort of one of the filters that I use is things like, would I say that to someone out loud to their face if we were in the same room having coffee together? If no, probably don't post it, or would I, would I pontificate in that way, like in a normal conversation, uninterrupted? Would I give that much edginess or anger, and so I think that there is an aspect of social media that does elevate or pull at some of our baser natures, and we have to resist that and try to figure out, what does it mean to be congruent, and then also just the notion of, will I regret this later, is a great question to ask yourself before you post something, because the nature of social media is the immediacy of everything. And so I know I feel this pressure, like something happens in the world and people are like, well, surely you have a thought and opinion on that. And so we've become accustomed to just, without actually reflecting very much as individuals, to just push something out the door as to our thoughts, feelings, or opinions about something. And so I don't do that in real life. I think of myself as a more reflective person. I'd want to think about it. I'd want to read a little bit. I'd want to sort of measure my tone and all of those things. But yet social media feels like, well, you don't have to do any of those things. Just, tweet or just put it out on Instagram or whatever it is. And so, I try to be conscientious about that notion of like, is this something I'm going to regret later? And then the other piece recently that I've had to do more work in is like, do I have a dog in this fight? Like, is this something that I need to, by my engagement or by my silence on, actually have an opinion on? Because the nature of the infrastructure of social media leads us to believe that we should and could and do have opinions on all kinds of things. And yet I realize I don't. Like, there's a ton of stuff I don't know anything about. And so I should probably just not get involved in that. But that's had to be a disciplined and learned response, because my natural response is like just to impulsively tweet about it or capture it or take the latest article and just push it out the door. Or so I think there is a shadow side to the lack of thought and pause that social media can give to us. And it also just fuels some of those emotional and neural pathways in us, like that sense of inadequacy can get fueled up even more. And so we want to, again, dial it up. We're taking the best Instagram pictures. The rest of the day was totally stunk, but that one shot that I got of me down by the water, whatever, and then people are like, wow, you must be having a great life, but you're overextending that sense of yourself. So yeah, I think I'm trying to balance those things, and it's a work in progress, and we'll see. We'll see what happens as time continues to march on.
You mentioned earlier one of the things you're working on, and as I said, or as you said, you're trying to live a congruent life. Right off the top, you talked about one of the, I'm not sure if it was a lie or what it was, but you just said you're trying to overcome your know-it-allness, and having to have a word on everything. And there it is, within a little half an hour, video talk, you've proven that to be true, which is, so you are being congruent. Well done. That's not always easy for us. Yeah. What are some rhythms, some things that maybe you've experienced in your life, some practices that people who are maybe struggling right now, just, life's just been a little hard. They have maybe been beaten down a little bit. What are some things, little thoughts of hope, maybe?
Yeah, I think one of the gifts, again, of my personality is with the ability to live into the future. If I'm experiencing a season of non-hope, I can go into the future and think to myself in sometimes a bit of a Pollyanna-ish kind of way, or like an Annie, well, the sun will come out tomorrow. And so I recognize and just want to say to people that sometimes being around people like that are wired like that can be just god awful annoying, because you may not feel and experience life like that, and so you're there's a sort of a sense of like, well, it almost sinks your ship even a little bit deeper because you can't see life that way, and so I want to be careful about sort of rhythms or orientation in that way that maybe wouldn't be shared by all of the people watching or listening, in that. But I think, there have been times in my life where I have felt profoundly at a loss for where I was going to hope and what things were going to look like, and that sense of real, like the walls are closing in, and like, all of the things that I had thought about myself maybe weren't true, and just a real sense of a very high challenge, very lonely season, and I think some of the disciplines or the rhythms of life, or the things I needed to do in that season, was actually needed to get reference points that were external to me to give me a sense of like, is the ground level, and am I going to keep walking forward in this? And so, things like trusted friends, that we were able to go there regularly in that season of our life and just collapse on their couch and just sort of say like, we're falling apart, and they would just not try and solve all of our problems, they would just sit with us and be wise and gentle counselors. And so, I would hope that for other people, that they would have someone or people in their life they could reach out to on that front. And then just getting a sense, for me, we had challenges in our early marriage, both around finances and then also just around infertility, and so that season of real just like, no matter what we felt like we were doing, it wasn't quote unquote solving the problem, and so it just felt like we were getting darker and darker, and I remember just crying out to God one day, and I was reading scriptures, and we were also trying to buy a house at that time, which wasn't going very well in that market, and so like I just was saying to you, I'm like, nothing is going right, what's up with that? And so I'm reading through the Psalms, and this verse, it's just regular practice of mine, this verse jumps out to me, and I think it was Psalm 67, where it says, he, being God, settles the barren mother in her home as the happy mother of children. And I don't remember anything else that I read for that whole season of my spiritual life. But that verse, I was like, I am camping out on that verse. And God was wonderfully faithful to that. And years after, and so I just kept coming back to that and saying, God, I'm pretty sure you gave that to me, because everything else on that page was flat that day, but that one shimmered, and that one really struck a chord with me. And so, I'd say if someone is deeply hopeful, I am not a name it and claim it type of person when it comes to scripture, just randomly flip open your Bible and point to a verse. But for me, that was such an anchoring and life-giving piece. I just thought, okay, we're in the dark right now, but God is going to be faithful to lead us into places of light sometime in the future, and it may not be an easy journey, and we didn't have any answers on either of those fronts. But yeah, that was an anchoring piece of just two things, sort of points from outside myself at different points in my life. So that's what I would say to people, is just try and surround yourself with that kind of support. And it's not a crutch, all of us need that at different points in our life. So don't feel like that makes you weak or anything like that. That's just part of journeying together and being a community. And, Lindsay, I know you, and I know you to be a person who does that really, really well for other people. And so, if you have connection with Lindsay and you're feeling that, I know he would take your phone call, because I know him well, and I know that he's a safe person on that front. So I've counted a privilege to be your friend, Lindsay.
Thanks, Brad. Two things I heard there. First of all, let's not try to fix everybody. Hey, sometimes we just need presence. We just need to be heard.
There's some things that casseroles just can't fix. Like churchy people are great with coming over with some food if you're having a hard time, but like that doesn't fix it.
Yeah. And take it to God. Let God meet you in the midst of it. Brad, this has been great. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Everybody, as you know or may not know, these episodes, I think this is our 8th or 9th episode, they're all on the social media feeds, both on Sandwich Baptist Facebook and YouTube. You can find it also on my YouTube channel, the back episodes, if you want to catch up on some other things. Brad, thank you very much. God bless everybody and have a fantastic evening.
Thanks, Lindsay. It's been great to be with you.